Why hello there, my name's Joe, and I'm here to talk to you about For Good Reason. What is For Good Reason, I hear you ask? Well, it's a website, because we definitely don't have enough websites. And, like Wikipedia or YouTube, it's primarily a place where users find content curated by other users. Unlike YouTube, users aren't submitting videos, they're submitting arguments, which are much more interesting. And note that I'm using argument here in the slightly technical sense to refer to a set of claims that are related in such a way as to, if you do it right, prove a conclusion. I'm not talking about disputes or conflicts, I'm talking about logic. Which brings me to the second point, which is that unlike Wikipedia, there is no site-wide consensus on For Good Reason. Wikipedia aims to provide users with a single view of the world. This isn't the case on For Good Reason. Here, it's perfectly permissible for one argument to conclude that sugar is acidic, and for another to conclude that it's not. Different pages on the site don't have to be in accordance with each other. Secondly, the site is a tool for writing arguments. Users can submit premises and specify their relations in such a way that the database knows which claims depend on which claims. I mean, obviously the database doesn't actually know anything, because it's a database and not a human, but you get the idea. You can also use the same tools to write arguments that prove the truth of claims that are already on the site, and to object to existing claims, to show why what someone else has said is wrong, which is one of the most satisfying things in the world. Which leads us to the third point, which is that the site is also a tool for analysing arguments. Because the database contains the connections between claims, you can see the consequences of rejecting a certain claim in relation to other claims. For example, if I reject the claim that God exists, then it follows that not everything that the Bible says is true, because it says in the Bible that God exists. And you can see these logical connections visually in a sort of chain reaction. And you can also type in two separate claims. For example, sugar isn't acidic, and sugar is bad for human health, and check whether or not they're compatible. Because it might turn out that it would be incoherent to believe both for the reasons in their respective arguments, because it turns out that the claim sugar is bad for you depends on it being true that sugar is acidic. And obviously, it's not coherent to claim that sugar is acidic and to simultaneously claim that sugar is not acidic. I mean, that would be as stupid as making a video saying that arguments are better than videos. So, let's have a look at the website. So, here's how the site looks so far. A little 90s, I gotta admit, but don't let that trouble you. Don't let that bring you down. Let's look at the latest arguments. These, you can imagine that they're like headlines or they're titles. Really, they're just the conclusions of arguments. And this one catches my eye. You shouldn't watch the Qatar 2022 FIFA World Cup for entertainment. Well, why not? Why not? So you can click on that, and here you have the argument. It's quite simple, really. I'll briefly run you through it. So, premise 1, if an action is morally wrong, you shouldn't do it. Pretty unobjectionable claim. Premise 2, if a subject does X solely because doing X is entertaining, and doing X promotes suffering, the subject is morally wrong in doing X. A little more controversial. Premise 3, watching the 2022 FIFA World Cup in Qatar promotes the suffering of migrant workers in Qatar. Okay, very controversial. Premise 4, watching the Qatar 2022 FIFA World Cup merely for entertainment is morally wrong. And here, we can see in this column we've got two numbers, number 2 and number 3, and that means that this premise is dependent on the truth of premise 2 and premise 3, and that if premise 2 and premise 3 are true, then it follows that this is true, right? So if it is true that it's wrong to do something for entertainment when it promotes suffering, and if it is true that watching the Qatar World Cup promotes suffering, then it follows that watching the Qatar World Cup just for entertainment is wrong. And then we've got our conclusion. You shouldn't watch it. And again, we've got two numbers. Why shouldn't you watch it? Well, because if an action is wrong, you shouldn't do it, and watching the Qatar World Cup is wrong. So, you shouldn't do it. Now, you can really see the magic of how the site works here with premise 3. Note that it's a slightly different colour, and when you hover your mouse over it, you've got a plus. That means that there's another argument that concludes with this premise. Basically, it means that if you click on it, you're going to see reasons why this premise is true. So let's click on that. Okay, we've got a new argument that concludes that watching the Qatar World Cup promotes suffering. So we can see why it promotes suffering. And within this argument, we've got the claim that the absence of a significant correlation between TV ratings and the enforcement of labour standards is a problem, is a cause of the suffering of workers in Qatar. And again, this is a different colour, so that means that we can click on that. And now we've got another argument. And you see things are getting more complicated, things are getting perhaps a bit more abstract. We're getting really down to the nitty-gritty of why things are the way they are. And again, we can open that up. And again, we can open that up. So at this point, you see we've got a completely abstract philosophical claim about what are the requirements for cause and effect. And the idea of the website is that that argument would already be there. A philosopher who's interested in cause and effect will have already written that argument, so that when it comes to the person talking about the relation between labour standards and migrant suffering, they don't need to spend a lot of time thinking about cause and effect. They can just put the argument in at the bottom to prop up as a foundation for what they're going to say next. And likewise, the journalist who's talking about the FIFA World Cup doesn't need to make fresh arguments about labour standards and migrant suffering, because those arguments will already be there. They just need to talk about the relation between TV ratings and the enforcement of labour standards. So that at the end user gets, a nice simple argument with just 4 premises. But if they're curious, if they're skeptical, they can delve deeper and they can find good reasons for believing each of the premises. Furthermore, we said that this premise seemed a bit dodgy, and we can see if anyone's objected to it. And let's see, view objections, and there is an objection. So someone's written an argument that concludes that this premise is false. And if we think that their objection is good, then we can dismiss this premise. We're saying we don't think this is true. And look, it's turned red, it's been crossed out. If it's not true, it means that this isn't true. Why? Because this depends on the truth of this. And if premise 4 isn't true, it means the conclusion isn't true. Why? Because the conclusion depends on the truth of premise 4. And note, I'm just going to undismiss that. Note that this works all the way down. So let's say we've come down really far, and we've got to this quite dense philosophical claim about cause and effect, and we actually have a problem here. I don't think that all causes make a difference with regard to the effects they produce. I think sometimes something might be a cause of something without making a difference. So we can dismiss that, and we can see how that affects the logical chain all the way up to the conclusion. Right? If we dismiss that, it turns out that we haven't proven this, because this seemingly, high-level ethical claim about what is and isn't permissible to watch, it actually is dependent at bottom on a certain conception of causality. So, you've seen what the website is, and you've seen how it works. What next? Well, you could just pause the video and go and eat a piece of toast, but you can eat a piece of toast anytime, and now is a really good time to get involved with the website, because it's a new community, it's open to being influenced in various directions. There are lots of roles for editors and administrators, maybe some censors, if you're interested in that sort of thing, as well as for anyone really who has some knowledge in pretty much any field. And also, though, because right now I'm making the website just by myself, I would really appreciate the help of anyone with any programming or coding skills. What's the difference? Who knows? Also, someone who knows anything about databases or web development or logic or web design. You don't have to be a professional or to have loads of experience. I mean, obviously that would be cool, but I'm sure we can work things out together. And finally, there are some conceptual problems with the site that need to be figured out. If you've just watched this and are thinking that the whole idea of the website is bad because of X, Y, and Z, then please get in touch and let me know X, Y, and Z. Or if you're watching it and thinking, yeah, the site could be good, but only if you did PQ and R, then yeah, email me. Let me know your ideas. You know, I've just laid the groundwork now, and I think there are lots of different places this could go. If you have some ideas, then please do get in touch. How to get in touch? pied3@hotmail.com. Thanks very much for watching, have a good day, and enjoy your toast.